Maybe don't know. Maybe don't.
This time, this time, this time, this time, this time to build, 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 this time power, this time to build power, this time to build power, this time to build power.
Yesterday I went shopping. Talk is still cheap. True story. A kid at the crag wanted to try to flash a steep, cruxy 12B, which would have been his most impressive flash by far. The hardest moves are right off the ground and ease up considerably after the second bolt, leading to a mostly juggy pump fest to the chains. Standard protocol is to stick clip the second bolt, where blowing the tough clip would certainly be disastrous. I gave the kid, who boulders stronger than I do, beta. Good beta. He climbed through the crux, and the very moment the second bolt was at his waist, he said, "Take!" Huh? He then proceeded to go bolt to the top, looking shaky the whole way. After a rest, he tied in under a nearby 13A. "Aren't you going to try the 12B again?" I asked. "Nah, I just send it, so I'm going to move on." Huh? True story. A fairly new female climber at the crag wanted to try a pumpy 12B, which is at least a full number above her hardest red point. While the route has no real crux and there's a great rest in the middle, it's a much harder proposition to link it all together than it might seem at first. She went bolt to bolt until she reached the slightly more difficult move just below the rest, which she immediately deemed too reachy. Though the previous season I watched a 9-year-old warm up on it. After a few half-hearted abortive attempts, she retreated to the ground. Later, I overheard her tell another girl, that 12B isn't that hard, it's just reachy, and that if it weren't for that move, she could have done it. Huh? True story. In every gym in this country, there lurk sickeningly strong climbers who rarely touch real rock but crush seemingly impossible gym routes easily. If asked, and sometimes when they aren't asked, they will tell you that they could climb 514 or V12. It would be easy, actually, if they really wanted to. Huh? Now, it's certainly possible that the kid could have sent the 12B next go. It's feasible that with time, the girl could find that pumpy 12 to be easy for her. And yes, it's likely that the gym monster could eventually climb those high numbers. The point is, they aren't doing it. They're just talking about it. Talking is easier than doing. Saying you could do it is far easier on the ego than trying and failing. What it isn't, however, is nearly as satisfying. If you only talk and never subject yourself to the humility of failure, will you ever begin to know where your limits lie? I, for one, want to know. I put my goals out there and I try for them. Succeed or fail, I'll never have to feel regret that I didn't give it my all. So, thanks to the doers, the people who get out and get it done. Thanks for the motivation, the inspiration, and for paving the way. Thanks for helping us to see that our own true story doesn't have to be a regretful one.
Well, I'm Sarah. I am one half of the Always Together team, which
true.
The name I will not use. I live in Cincinnati, been here most of my life, started climbing when I was like 12, pretty, recreationally with my uncle, and then started getting more into it in my later teens, worked at the gym, kind of typical Midwestern gym kid things. Got super into it after high school. That's when I met Taylor. And then shortly after that, got roped into assisting Chris in coaching Taylor and getting him to actually do things. And inadvertently, became part of the crew. And then the kind of Three Musketeers we were for several years, kind of romping through the red and going out west a few times together. And Now, me and Taylor are married. I'm stuck with him forever. And we're back here in Cincinnati. We have a little house in the woods. And I'm a new nurse. I've just started nursing about a year ago.
Yeah, congrats on that, by the way.
Yeah, TBD on how I feel about it. But so kind of figuring that out and trying to get back to climbing being more of a priority in my life, since for a while it kind of couldn't be. And then like Rona happened. So, can we say that? Is that like a thing that gets media taken down if you
can say that?
Oh, okay.
I'm not afraid of the powers that be.
Oh, okay. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at now. Condensed version.
Yeah. Taylor, who are you?
The other half. Since you now know all of Sarah's life story, I'm Taylor Frohmiller. I'm just a climber from the Midwest. I've been climbing for, I think, the last 15 years. Started out when I was around 15 on the climbing team, climbed on the team, competed, did that whole thing. Ended up working at the gym while I was in school, coached the team, worked at the gym, did that whole thing, traveled a lot for climbing, and I mean we've been after it ever since. Sarah and I met, I think, I guess literally on my 18th birthday, and
it's a story for another time.
Oh, shut up. We've been climbing together, then married, and continue doing our thing.
Yeah, and you two both had a pretty drastically different kind of entrance into climbing than I did, but I think your entrance into climbing is probably more people share it nowadays. A lot of climbers coming up now either get introduced to the gym by friends or parents or whatever, or they, are part of the climbing team, and then they're working at the gym while they're in high school. And, that seems to be a pretty common story nowadays.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I just think you get it, it's rare or less common for people to like continue it through college and stuff. A lot of people either pick it up in college or start on a team and then drop off and then unfortunately don't pick it back up, kind of thing. So
yeah.
I think sorry.
Go ahead.
I think a lot of kids, certainly now, I feel like climbing in a gym nowadays is like a different sport in and of itself. Like, it's like climbing outside is one thing and climbing in a gym is another thing. And like, often there are kids who start on the team now who like don't climb outside, and that's not their main focus. And definitely Taylor, when he was on the team, was much more, he was kind of like the standout of the team. Well, in a way of kids that like really wanted to climb outside. And competing was kind of a byproduct of that.
Mm-hmm. And, something that I think really relates to this particular essay, the yesterday I went shopping, but talk is still cheap, is that when I first met Taylor, he was one of the strong kids in the gym and could obviously outclimb the vast majority of the people in the gym who were climbing outside a lot. Mm-hmm. But whether it was for, lack of people taking you outside, Taylor, or whether it was, just, like I witnessed when I first went outside with you guys, that you spent most of the day cuddling, whatever it was, there was something that was kind of like, oh, this kid isn't anywhere near climbing as hard as he could outside. And something that I saw a lot of team kids do, and I never necessarily saw you do, was this whole talk thing where they were like, oh, well, I could do that. That's not a big deal,
Yeah.
Even though they aren't doing it.
Definitely. I think I started on a team with a bunch of people that just didn't take outside climbing that seriously. And I've thought about this actually a lot of now that, like, you know, climbing 514 is kind of a norm for a lot of people, which is crazy because when I started climbing, the hardest thing in the gym was 13A. And like, that was a huge deal. Like, I remember Tony Fry he and like maybe one other person could climb like a 13A and had done 13A outside, and like doing 12A back then was like groundbreaking in our little community in Cincinnati. And especially going climbing with you and the other mentors I've had in my climbing career, just kind of are just like, if you go outside and, you know, why can you not climb harder or do something that challenges you that is, you know, sounds absurd in the gym, but no, there's tons of things to rock climb outside on.
Yeah. And I think it's just so easy to get caught up in the talking of it. Like, oh, well, I climb harder than this person in the gym. That person just did 13A. So certainly I can do 13A. You know, I can probably climb 13B.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to get trapped in that space when there's so much that goes into actually getting out there, getting on the thing you want to get on, putting in the work on it to actually do it. It's a lot more than just I'm strong enough.
Well, I think that's where a lot of people get their feelings hurt when, you know, you, and that's why I think people kind of obsess about grades in the gym way more than they should, because there is so much more that goes into climbing outside. And this, I mean, a little bit kind of carries over into the topic that I'm more focusing on, but, you know, trying hard to like send a boulder or a route in the gym, and then going outside and trying hard physically on the climb is only part of the equation. And like, you have to have your ducks in a row a lot more to like send a rock climb, no matter the grade outside. So sure, you can, you know, climb circles around somebody in the gym, but if you don't have good tactics, or you spend your day at the crag sitting around cuddling your girlfriend, like, it doesn't mean shit. And then you come home and, you know, you haven't done anything, even though you feel like you should be able to. And then it kind of starts this like negative cycle of, oh, well, I just need to be stronger. Oh, like, I should have been able to do that. I can totally do that. Or some other excuse for why it didn't happen, when really it's just that you expected it to just happen, you know. And I think we've all been there in one way or in the other, just like, oh, I know my skills, I should just be able to do this. And then having to find, you know, justification for why you didn't.
Yeah, it's easy to overlook all of those kind of extraneous factors that go into actually climbing well outside, you know, especially when, like you two, you live 2.5, 3 hours away from the crag.
Yep.
You know, it's a big life commitment to getting down there enough to actually climb things that are really hard for you.
It definitely. And I think, and like, we've made a huge effort to do that. Like, I think in my bag of tricks, I think I'm better at the outside the box things than I am better at the rock climbing thing. Like, obviously that's a big part of it, but like, there's some kids and there's guys that climb around that I'm just like envious of. I'm like, oh my God, if I could be as strong as him, I'd climb everything, right? And I think it's just, I'm a bit of a relentless person when I get obsessed with things. And like, that is what has taken me as far as I've gone, is just like, I'm going to do this rock climb. And I don't know if I can, but I'm going to. And I just get obsessed with it. And I've walked away, you know, I learned a lot of hard lessons and walked away empty-handed. But the relentlessness of, you know, I'll go to the same crag and sit under the same rock for an entire season. And Sarah will be like, I didn't get to rock climb at all because we went to drive by every day. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but I'm getting there.
Yeah. Well, you know, you weren't always that way though.
No,
and I'm glad that you're starting to understand the way I felt all those years ago. Like,
Yeah.
this kid is so fucking strong. There's no reason I should be climbing harder than him outside. And if I had his finger strength, I'd climb fucking anything, you know?
Same.
That's how it
Still
felt.
true.
Yeah. So I think it's cool that you've grown into that place. And I actually, you know, one of the things that I thought about when I was writing this essay originally that really irks me, it really bothers me when people make these statements about, oh, I could do that, that's no big deal, is that, you know, the three of us would spend so much time planning our seasons out, planning our days out, you know, getting up at 5 a.m. to start driving. There was so much work went into the logistics of it that when somebody else is like, oh, well, I climb harder than that person in the gym, so I could do that, it diminishes all this work that the other people are putting in.
Definitely.
And I think that's a big part of that too. Like when people kind of have that like bravado almost of like, oh, well, I could do that. Or even if it's just internal to themselves, it's like you're kind of like cutting the process short. You're like selling the whole process short. Like when I tell people about like what our Tuesdays were for years, you know, every Tuesday, you know, we scheduled our whole life around those Tuesdays. You know, I was in college and I refused to schedule a class on a Tuesday or a Thursday because that was our climbing day.
Is that why you had to go back to school?
But, you know, I'm like, yeah, we would leave at 5 or 5:15 and we'd get home at 11 or midnight and then go do, and it was just what we did. And we were always the first people at the crag and we were always the last people at the crag. And I'll have to admit, in our older age, we don't get up and leave at 5 anymore. But
oh yeah, hell no.
You do the other things to make it easier. Like you make your sleeping arrangements. Since we do live further away, you know, you make your sleeping arrangements better and you buy the right vehicles to get where you want to go. And, you know, all those kinds of things. Pack your food the night before so you're not rushing around in the morning. And that's all part of that process of being successful. So you don't roll up to the crag at noon and then you're pissed because your route's in the sun and there's a line. Well, I could have sent that route today, but there was a bunch of people there and it was in the sun. Yeah, well, you could have sent the route if you got there on time, warmed up properly, you know, got on the rock climb when it was in the better conditions. But, you know, like you're the only one you have to blame for your perceived lack of success. Yeah. And that is definitely something that was drilled forcefully into our heads from you. And now we pass it along to the masses. So
good. I'm glad that you are passing it along.
If they want to hear it or not.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I was doing. I was giving it to everybody, whether they wanted it or not. In fact, all of the examples in this essay are real people from RockQuest.
Oh, I know. I get it. Oh my god! And
I'm like, yep.
I think I like hurt somebody's feelings the other day because they were like, I can't reach that. And I'm like, bullshit. Lynn Hill's like 5'1". I don't hear her.
Yeah. It's funny, you know. But I talked to Yasmin this morning about a couple of the essays, and you know, it reminded me that so many of these were written at a time when we were all climbing in RockQuest all the time. We were all going to the Red all the time. And I was just writing these essays about things that I was witnessing in the gym or hearing around the gym or at the Red. So almost all of them are written about actual people who shall not be named at this point.
I think the biggest, or at least a very distinct moment I can remember in my climbing career is like when you basically took Justin around the Red for a season. Like he basically was like, you know how he is. He's like, I don't really care that much. And you were like, okay, we're going here every day then. And like he had the best season probably to this date that he has ever had.
Yeah, I think so.
And I was like, oh, that stuff
I should listen to him.
I was like, oh, that stuff makes that gets you to send routes really quickly, actually. So,
yeah, Taylor, I don't know if you remember this or not. This is, I tell this story in a lot of my workshops and talks that I do. And it doesn't really relate necessarily to this chapter, but it's such a good story. I can't not tell it here. Do you remember when you sent Snooker?
He tells that story all the time too.
So just for the people listening, it was one of your early 13As. It wasn't your first by any means, but relatively early. Is that right?
Yeah, like first 10 or something like that. Or
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, and I think you had fallen up near the, in that last head wall a time or two or something. And at the time, you had this habit of not wanting to try hard, which is what we're going to talk to mostly with Sarah here in just a minute. But you had this habit of saying take when you thought you might fall. And I was like, that's not going to fucking happen today. And you were on Snooker. You left the rest, and I couldn't really see you above that bulge very well. And I hadn't been on the route in a long time. I couldn't remember exactly where the chains were. And you're climbing, and it seems really casual. And I'm like, oh, well, he's not to that upper hard part yet, And you're like, take. And I'm like, fuck no. I'm not fucking you keep fucking rock climbing, and I'm yelling at you, and the whole cave there is like stopped and looking at me. And finally you're like, you keep climbing, and you're like, I'm above the chains now. I'm like, oh, I see.
Yeah, Taylor tells people that story a lot too.
Yeah, I tell it
like taking on a bolt.
I tell it in my talks when I'm talking about trust, because I think that's something you have to build in people. And for some reason, you trusted me enough to keep climbing, even though you'd already clipped the damn anchors, and we're done with the route. So
that's funny. I think
that was a great day.
Another moment, just particularly on that wall, that I think is very probably one of my most proudest, climbing stories, I guess, is I was trying Thamtopsis on that wall years later.
Speaking
I was thinking about this earlier.
Years later, and I think Kyle Fisher rebolted the anchors or something lower because the rope runs up over a bulge or something. And I had tried the route, and I had left a quick draw on that anchor that earlier that day, and just wasn't feeling it. So I went up it and cleaned the anchor and came down, and Sarah was like, you look good, just try it one more time. And I'm like, all right. So I basically sent the route, got to that hold, and couldn't pull rope up because it was up over a bulge, and my draw wasn't on it. So I'm like, well, shit. I'll just grab, there's a ledge up there, so you mantle the ledge to the old anchors. And I'm like, well, all the other guys that came before me did it the old way. I'll just keep going, and I'll just clip when I'm standing. Well, as I'm mantling on the hardest route I've ever climbed, my foot popped, and I with my waist at the new anchors. Yeah. And the whole mother lode goes quiet. And it's packed October day, I think, or November or something. There must have been 50 people that just went dead quiet. And I'm then, I come down, and everybody's like, oh, you did it. Good job. I'm like, yeah, but did I?
Yeah.
I got to where the new anchors were. But Sarah's like, what do you want to do? And I'm like, I don't know. So we packed up, and I think we drove and met you over at Solar that day.
Yep, you did.
You and Edwin were sitting there, and I was all mopey and kind of excited, but kind of mopey, and drank a beer. And basically,
he was trying to get you to tell him that he did it.
Yeah, I was went looking for guidance, and I'm and you both were like, well, in our, doesn't count until it counts. And I'm like,
that's how Nate and Edwin said it. Chris was like, you didn't do that fucking route.
Yeah, more or less. So they're like, doesn't count until it counts. So I'm like, fine, I'll go try again. So I like four-wheel back to a creek, go back, hike up, and there's like nobody there now, and except for a couple of people, and this little kid was there. And I'm like, all right, I'm gonna give it a Hail Mary, and sent the route then, and those little kids cheer me on and crushed the route, and I'm like, you know, it doesn't count until you do it. It's as much as you want to say, oh, I felt the anchors. Did you do it? Not until you do it.
Yeah, and you know, you would have felt like you would have always had that asterisk on it.
Always.
Talking about it. And to be able to just say, yeah, I did it, and not to have to qualify it, you had to go back. And
definitely.
You know,
and that one's, there's no place to hide on that route. There's no knee bars. There's no rock stacks. There's no, it's just good, pure, hard rock climbing. And it's a huge challenge. And if you don't climb up the damn acres, it doesn't count.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to chat about this. It's been really, you know, I've thought a lot about those years sport climbing because I've focused mostly on bouldering since then. And I haven't found another, like, I mean, it was more than just a partnership with you two for that time. It was, you know, there was just this momentum that we had that's so hard to capture in any other situation. And those were definitely special years for me. So.
Oh, same here.
Yeah, we had a blast. We still do. We meet up once in a blue moon anymore.
Yeah, well, hopefully I get to see you guys this summer. So, or maybe sooner.
Tomorrow, don't squash the banana. Commitment. We don't tweet. We scream like eagles.
This time, 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 power, this time to build power, this time to build power, this time to build power. 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 This time to build. 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 This time.